Hey there. Welcome back to Scary Times. The clock just struck midnight, and there's something unsettling about tonight's atmosphere. I've got some terrifying tales that'll make you question every shadow in your room. If you enjoy getting scared, with us, hit that subscribe button and join our haunted family. Now turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and let Scary Times guide you through tonight's collection of spine-chilling stories. The first time I saw something strange in the subway, it was late at night and the last train had already gone. I was a university student in Tokyo, and my part-time job at a ramen shop kept me out late. The trains were usually crowded, but that night, the station was almost empty. The air was thick and heavy, and the only sound was the buzzing of the lights above. I waited on the platform, checking my phone and hoping the next train would come soon. There was a man at the far end of the platform dressed in a suit standing perfectly still. He didn't seem to be waiting for a train. He just stared down the dark tunnel, not moving at all. I tried not to look at him, but it was hard not to. Notice how out of place he seemed. A few minutes later, my friend Kenji showed up. He had missed his train too, and we decided to wait together. Kenji was always joking and never took anything seriously. He laughed about the empty station and said it felt like we were in a horror movie. I tried to laugh with him, but I couldn't stop looking at the man in the suit. Kenji noticed and waved at him, but the man didn't react. Kenji shrugged and said maybe he was drunk or lost. We sat down on a bench. The lights flickered, and for a second everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. I looked around, but there was no way he could have left without us seeing him. Kenji grinned and said maybe the man was a ghost. He started telling stories about haunted subway stations in Tokyo. He said sometimes people see spirits waiting for trains that never come. I told him to stop, but he just laughed louder. The next night, Kenji wanted to explore the station after closing. He had heard rumors about a hidden passage behind one of the old maintenance doors. I didn't want to go, but he convinced me. We waited until the last train left and then slipped past the ticket gates. The station was even quieter than before. Our footsteps echoed down the empty hallways. We found the maintenance door near the end of the platform. It was old and rusty, but not locked. Kenji pushed it open and we stepped inside. The air was cold and smelled like metal. There were stairs leading down, much deeper than I expected. Kenji pulled out his phone light and we started down the steps. At the bottom, we found a narrow tunnel. The walls were covered in old posters and faded writing. We walked slowly, our lights shaking. I felt like we shouldn't be there. Kenji kept joking, but his voice was quieter now. We reached a small room with broken chairs and an old vending machine. There was a door on the other side, half open. Kenji went to look, but I stayed back. I heard him gasp and call my name. I ran over and saw him staring at the wall. There were handprints all over it, smeared in something dark and sticky. The handprints were small, like a child's, but there were so many of them. Suddenly, we heard footsteps behind us. We turned and saw the man in the suit standing in the tunnel. His face was pale, and his eyes were empty. Kenji tried to talk to him, but the man just stared. Then he started to walk toward us, slow and steady. We ran back up the stairs, slamming the maintenance door behind us. We didn't stop running until we were outside the station, gasping for air. Kenji tried to laugh it off, but I could see he was scared. That night, Kenji sent me a message. He said he kept seeing the man's face in his dreams. He said he felt cold, even in his own room. I told him to rest and forget about it, but I couldn't sleep either. The next morning, Kenji didn't show up for class. I called him, but he didn't answer. I went to his apartment, but no one was home. Later that day, the police came to the university. They said Kenji had been found dead in his room. The door was locked from the inside. There were no signs of struggle, but his face was twisted in fear, and his hands were covered in dark stains, just like the handprints on the wall. Everyone said it was a heart attack, but I knew it was something else. I kept thinking about the man in the suit and the handprints in the tunnel. I tried to tell myself it was just a bad dream, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Kenji's face. After Kenji's funeral, I stopped taking the subway at night, but sometimes I had no choice. One evening, I missed the last train again. The station was empty, just like before. I felt a chill as I walked down the platform. At the far end, I saw a shadow standing perfectly still. I tried not to look, but I couldn't help it. The shadow didn't move, didn't make a sound. I hurried out of the station and walked home. That night, I dreamed of the tunnel again. I saw the man in the suit standing in the darkness. He reached out his hand and I saw the same dark stains on his fingers. Behind him, I saw dozens of small hands reaching out from the walls, grabbing at nothing. I woke up sweating. For days, I felt like something was following me. I saw shadows in the corners of my room. My phone would ring, but when I answered, there was only silence. Sometimes I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. One night, I went back to the station. I wanted to prove to myself it was all in my head. The maintenance door was still there. I opened it and went down the stairs, my heart pounding. The tunnel was darker than I remembered. The handprints were still on the wall, but now there were more of them. Some were fresh, still wet and sticky. I heard a whisper behind me. I turned and saw the man in the suit. This time his face was closer. I could see his eyes, empty and deep. He reached out and I felt something cold wrap around my wrist. I tried to pull away, but I couldn't move. Suddenly the tunnel was full of voices. I heard children crying, begging for help. The walls seemed to close in on me. I screamed and ran, pushing past the man. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for breath. After that, I started seeing things everywhere. In the train windows, I saw faces looking back at me. On empty streets, I saw shadows following close behind. I stopped sleeping. My friends said I looked sick, but I couldn't tell them what I had seen. One evening, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a picture of the tunnel, and in the center was the man in the suit staring straight at me. The message said, "Come back." I deleted it, but the messages kept coming. Always the same photo, always the same words. I moved to a new apartment far from the station, but the dreams followed me. Every night I found myself back in the tunnel, surrounded by handprints and whispers. The man in the suit waited for me, his hand outstretched. I tried to talk to a priest, but he just told me to pray and stay away from dark places. My parents said I should see a doctor, but I knew no medicine could help me. The subway was cursed, and I had seen what I wasn't supposed to see. One day I read an old story online about the station. Years ago, a child went missing there. People said she was playing near the tracks and vanished. Her mother searched for her every night, always wearing a suit because she had just come from work. Some said the mother died in the station, still looking for her child. Others said the spirits of lost children haunted the tunnels, waiting for someone to help them. Now, I think the man in the suit is not a man at all, but the mother, twisted by grief and loneliness. The handprints are from the children who never left. Kenji and I disturbed them, and now they won't let me go. I don't know how much longer I can last. Every day, I feel weaker. The shadows are closer now. Sometimes I wake up with dark stains on my hands, and I can't remember how they got there. I hear whispers in the night calling my name, asking me to come back. If you ever find yourself alone in a subway station late at night, and you see someone standing still at the end of the platform, don't look at them. Don't follow them. Don't go through any doors that should stay closed. Some things in the dark are better left alone. And if you hear a voice calling your name, run. Don't stop, no matter what. My name is Min Jun, and I grew up in Seoul. Every day I took the subway to school and back. The subway was always full of people, noise, and bright lights. But there was one station that felt different from the rest. It was called Gwanak Station. The lights there always seemed a little dimmer, and the air was colder even in summer. People rarely talked while waiting for the train at that station. My friends and I used to joke about it, saying it was haunted, but none of us really believed. At one night, I missed the last train home. I had stayed out too late with my friends, and when I reached Gwanak Station, the place was almost empty. Only a few people waited on the platform. I checked the schedule and saw the next train wouldn't come for another 20 minutes. I sat down on a bench and pulled out my phone, trying to pass the time. After a few minutes, I noticed an old man standing at the far end of the platform. He was staring at the tracks, not moving. He wore an old gray coat and a hat pulled low over his face. I thought maybe he was homeless, but there was something strange about him. He didn't seem to blink or even breathe. The other people on the platform seemed to avoid looking at him. A girl my age sat down next to me. Her name was Hannah, and I recognized her from school. We started talking mostly about homework and teachers. After a while, she asked if I had ever heard the stories about this station. I laughed and said yes, but I didn't believe in ghosts. She smiled, but her eyes looked worried. Suddenly, the lights flickered. For a moment, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the old man was gone. I looked around, but I didn't see him anywhere. The other people on the platform looked nervous. Hannah grabbed my arm and whispered, "Did you see that?" I nodded, feeling a chill run down my spine. The train finally arrived. We got on and found seats near the door. The car was almost empty. I tried to shake off the strange feeling, but Hannah looked pale. She kept glancing over her shoulder as if she expected to see someone following us. When we reached her stop, Hannah stood up quickly. She told me to be careful and got off the train. I watched her walk away, then leaned back, in my seat feeling tired. I tried to forget about the old man, but his image stayed in my mind. The next day at school, everyone was talking about Hannah. She hadn't come to class. By lunchtime, we heard the news. Hannah had been found dead in her apartment early that morning. The police didn't know what happened. There were no signs of a break-in, no injuries, nothing. She just died. Some people said she looked terrified, like she had seen something horrible before she died. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking about the old man at the station and how Hannah had been so scared. I wondered if it was just a coincidence or if something from the subway had followed her home. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I kept hearing strange sounds outside my window. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed about Gwanak Station. In my dream, I was standing on the empty platform. The lights flickered, and the old man appeared at the far end. He turned and looked at me. I couldn't see his face, just darkness under his hat. He raised his hand and pointed at me. I woke up sweating and shaking. I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, but I couldn't get rid of the fear. The next day, I avoided the subway and walked to school instead. My friends asked me what was wrong, but I didn't want to talk about it. For the next few days, I kept seeing the old man everywhere. Sometimes I saw him standing at the end of the hallway at school. Other times, I saw his reflection in windows or puddles on the street. No one else seemed to notice him. I started to feel like I was losing my mind. One afternoon, I stayed late at school to finish a project. By the time I left, it was already dark. I knew I couldn't avoid the subway forever, so I walked to Gwanak Station. The platform was almost empty again. I tried not to look around, but I felt someone watching me. The train arrived and I got on. I sat near the door, my heart pounding. The car was empty except for one person, a woman sitting at the far end. She looked familiar, but I couldn't see her face clearly. As the train moved through the tunnels, the lights flickered again. I glanced at the woman, and for a moment I thought I saw Hannah's face. She looked at me with sad eyes, then turned away. I got off at my stop and ran home. That night I dreamed of the old man again. This time he was closer. He whispered my name, his voice cold and empty. I woke up gasping for air. After that, I started avoiding the subway as much as possible, but sometimes I had no choice. Each time I went back to Gwanak Station, I felt the same cold fear. I stopped seeing the old man, but the feeling of being watched never went away. A few weeks later, another student from my school died. He had also been at the station late at night waiting for the last train. People started talking about a curse. They said if you saw the old man at Gwanak Station, something bad would happen to you soon after. I tried to warn my friends, but they just laughed. They said ghosts weren't real. But I knew what I had seen. I knew what had happened to Hannah. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream about the station. I see the empty platform, the flickering lights, and the old man waiting at the far end. He never moves, never speaks, but I know he's waiting for me. I wake up with my heart racing, afraid to go back to sleep. Now, whenever I pass Gwanak Station, I look away. I don't want to see the old man. I don't want him to notice me. But deep down, I know he's still there, waiting for the next person to see him, waiting for the next soul to take. When I was 16, my friends and I went exploring an abandoned hospital on the edge of our town in Hokkaido. The building had been empty for years. People said it was haunted, but we didn't believe in ghosts. We just wanted to have some fun, and maybe scare each other. There were 4 of us that night. Me, my best friend Soda, our classmate Yuki, and Soda's cousin Mika. We met at the train station after dark and brought flashlights and snacks. The air was cold, and the streets were quiet. The hospital was a big gray building with broken windows and weeds growing everywhere. The front door was locked, so we climbed in through a side window. Inside, the air smelled like mold and dust. The halls were dark and full of old trash. Some of the walls had strange stains. We joked about what they could be, but I felt uneasy. We started on the first floor, shining our flashlights into each room. Most were empty, with broken beds and old chairs. Sometimes we found old papers or bottles. Soda made jokes to keep us from getting too scared, but I could tell he was nervous too. Yuki kept taking pictures with her phone. Mika was the quietest. She kept looking behind us, like she thought someone was following. After a while, we found a staircase and went up to the second floor. The air felt colder there. We passed a room with a broken door. Inside, the walls were covered in old handprints. Some looked like they were made by children. Yuki took more pictures, but Mika said we should leave that room alone. Soda laughed and said ghosts weren't real. We kept exploring. In one hallway, we found an old wheelchair tipped over on its side. Soda pushed it, and it rolled down the hall by itself, making a loud noise. We all laughed, but then we heard something upstairs. It sounded like footsteps. We stopped and listened. The footsteps were slow and heavy. They didn't sound like any of us. Soda said it was probably just the building settling, but Mika grabbed my arm. She whispered that she wanted to go home. I said we could leave soon, but Soda and Yuki wanted to go up to the 3rd floor. I didn't want to look scared, so I agreed. The stairs creaked as we climbed. The 3rd floor was even darker. Our flashlights barely lit the hallway. At the end of the hall, there was a door with red writing on it. I couldn't read what it said, but Mika said it was a warning. Soda wanted to open it. He turned the handle, but the door was stuck. He pushed hard, and it finally opened with a loud noise. Inside was a small room, almost empty except for an old hospital bed. There were straps on the bed, and the mattress was torn. The walls were scratched, and there was more red writing. Yuki took pictures, but Mika stayed in the hallway, shaking. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. The room went cold. Our flashlights flickered. I heard a whisper, but I couldn't tell what it said. Soda tried to open the door, but it wouldn't move. Then we heard someone crying. The sound came from under the bed. Yuki pointed her flashlight there, but nothing was visible. The crying grew louder. I felt something cold touch my leg. I jumped back, and Soda started banging on the door. The crying stopped, and for a moment everything was silent. Then a pale hand reached out from under the bed and grabbed Yuki's ankle. She screamed and kicked, and the hand let go. Soda finally forced the door open, and we all ran out of the room. Mika was gone. We shouted her name, but there was no answer. We ran down the stairs calling for her. On the 2nd floor, we found her standing in the hallway, staring at the wall. Her eyes were wide, and she wasn't moving. I shook her shoulder, and she finally looked at me. She said she saw a woman in white standing at the end of the hall. The woman had no face, just long black hair that covered everything. Mika said the woman pointed at her and whispered her name. We decided to leave right away. We climbed out the window and ran all the way back to the train station. No one spoke on the way home. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the hand under the bed and the way Mika looked when we found her. The next morning, Soda called me. He sounded scared. He said Mika hadn't come out of her room since we got home. She wouldn't eat or talk to anyone. Her parents were worried. Later that day, Soda called again, crying. Mika was found dead in her room. She was sitting on her bed, eyes wide open, her hands clutching her blanket. The doctor said her heart just stopped, but Soda said her face looked like she died from fear. After Mika's funeral, none of us wanted to talk about that night. Yuki deleted all the photos from her phone, but she said sometimes her phone turned on by itself at night and played the sound of crying. Soda stopped joking and barely spoke to anyone. I kept having nightmares about the hospital. In my dreams, I saw the woman in white, her hair covering her face, pointing at me. A week after Mika died, I found a note in my school bag. It was written in red ink, just like the writing on the hospital door. It said, "You saw me. Now I will see you." My hands shook as I read it. I tried to tell myself it was just a prank, but I knew it wasn't. That night, I heard footsteps outside my room. I locked my door and hid under the covers. I heard someone whispering my name. The air grew cold, and I saw a shadow move across the wall. I closed my eyes and prayed for morning. The next day, I told Soda and Yuki about the note. Soda said he got one too. Yuki hadn't, but she said she saw a woman in white standing outside her house the night before. We were all terrified. We tried to act normal at school, but we couldn't stop looking over our shoulders. One evening, I saw the woman in white at the end of my street. She didn't move, just stood there, her hair blowing in the wind. I ran inside and locked the door. That night, I dreamed of the hospital again. I was trapped in the small room with the bed, and the hand reached out for me. I woke up sweating and shaking. A few days later, Yuki stopped coming to school. Her mother called mine and said Yuki was too scared to leave her room. Soda and I tried to visit her, but she wouldn't open the door. I felt like the ghost from the hospital was following all of us, waiting for the right time. One night, Soda called me in a panic. He said he saw the woman in white in his backyard. He was crying and begged me to come over, but I was too scared. The next morning, Soda's mother called me. Soda had died in his sleep. The doctors said it was his heart, but I knew the truth. After that, I stopped sleeping. Every night I heard whispers and footsteps. Sometimes I saw the woman in white outside my window. I was so scared I barely ate or spoke. My parents worried, but I couldn't tell them what happened. I felt like I was next. One evening, I found another note in my room. It said, "Soon." That night I heard the crying again, louder than before. I locked my door and waited for morning. When the sun rose, the crying stopped, but the fear didn't go away. Now every time I close my eyes, I see the hospital, the small room and the woman in white. I know she's waiting for me. I don't know how much longer I can last. If you ever find yourself near an abandoned building in Japan, don't go inside. Some doors should never be opened. The road to my grandmother's village in northern Thailand was long and winding. My parents and I only visited once a year during the rainy season. I always felt nervous when the car entered the thick forest that surrounded the village. The trees grew so close together that the sunlight barely reached the ground, and the air felt heavy and damp. My father said the forest was ancient and full of old spirits. He told me not to wander off the path or the spirits would get confused and follow me home. One afternoon, after a heavy rain, I was sent to pick some wild herbs for my grandmother. She gave me a small basket and told me to stay close to the edge of the forest. I promised her I would not go far. The ground was soft and muddy, and my shoes made squishing sounds with every step. The forest was quiet except for the distant call of birds and the dripping of water from the leaves. I started picking the herbs I recognized, but I soon saw some beautiful red flowers deeper in the forest. I hesitated, remembering my father's warning, but the flowers looked so bright against the dark green. I told myself it would be quick, just a few steps inside, and no one would notice. As I walked toward the flowers, the air turned colder, and the sounds of the village faded away. When I bent down to pick the flowers, I heard a soft whisper behind me. I turned around, but there was no one there. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was just the wind, but the whisper came again, a little louder this time. It sounded like a child calling my name. My heart started beating faster. I looked around, but all I could see were trees and shadows. I decided to hurry back, but when I turned, the path was gone. I tried retracing my steps, but every direction looked the same. The trees seemed to close in around me, and I could barely see the sky. I called out for help, but my voice was swallowed by the forest. The whispering grew louder, and I realized it was not just one voice but many, all calling my name. Panic set in. I ran in what I thought was the right direction, but the forest only grew darker. My clothes got caught on branches and my basket fell to the ground. I left it behind and kept running. Suddenly, I tripped over a root and fell hard. The ground was cold and wet, and I felt something move under my hand. When I looked, I saw a small wooden doll, old and covered in dirt. Its face was carved into a strange smile, and its eyes were painted black. I picked up the doll and the whispering stopped. The forest became silent. Too silent. I stood up, holding the doll tightly, and tried to calm myself. I remembered the stories my grandmother told me about forest spirits who took the form of children to trick people. She said if you ever got lost, you should close your eyes and count to 10, then walk in the direction your heart told you. I closed my eyes, hugged the doll, and counted to 10. When I opened them, the forest looked different. The trees were not as close, and I could see a faint light in the distance. I walked toward the light, my feet heavy with mud. The whispering started again, but this time it was softer, almost sad. As I got closer to the light, I saw a group of children standing in a circle. They wore old-fashioned clothes and their faces were pale. They watched me but did not move. In the center of the circle was a small fire, and around it were more wooden dolls like the one I found. I felt drawn to them, but I also felt afraid. One of the children stepped forward. She had long black hair and a gentle smile. She spoke in a voice that echoed in my head. "You found our doll. Thank you for bringing it back." She reached out her hand and I gave her the doll. Her fingers were cold, and her touch made me shiver. The other children smiled, and the fire grew brighter. The girl looked at me and said, "You can go home now, but don't forget us." The circle of children slowly faded into mist and the fire went out. I stood alone in the clearing, unsure if what I saw was real. I walked toward the edge of the forest, and soon I saw the village lights. My grandmother was waiting for me, worried. She hugged me and asked where I had been. I told her I got lost, but I did not tell her about the children or the doll. She looked at me for a long time and then said, "The forest is full of memories. Some are happy, some are sad. Always show respect when you go inside." That night, I could not sleep. I kept hearing the whispers and seeing the pale faces in my mind. I wondered if the children were still out there, waiting for someone to remember them. The next morning, I went to the edge of the forest and left some flowers and sweets as an offering. I whispered a thank you and hoped the spirits would find peace. After that day, I never went into the forest alone again. But sometimes when the wind was just right, I heard the soft voices calling my name, gentle and far away. I knew they were watching, but I was not afraid anymore. I remembered the girl's words and tried to keep the memory of the lost children alive. Years later, when I was older, I asked my grandmother about the wooden dolls. She told me they were made long ago to protect children who got lost in the forest. Each doll had a spirit inside waiting to help those in need. She said the forest was a place of both danger and kindness, and that we should always leave a small gift when we passed by. Now, whenever I visit the village, I bring flowers and sweets to the edge of the forest. I stand quietly and listen for the whispers. Sometimes I think I see the children watching from the shadows, smiling with their dark eyes. I feel sad for them, but I'm also grateful. They showed me that even in the darkest places, there is a light that guides us home. My cousin Jihoon was always the brave one in our family. He liked to show off, especially when we were kids. One summer, when I was staying with my aunt and uncle in Busan, he dared me to sneak into the old hospital at the edge of our neighborhood. Everyone said it was haunted. The building was tall and gray with broken windows and vines climbing up the walls. At night, people said you could see lights moving inside, even though the hospital had been closed for years. Jihoon said the stories were just to scare children. He wanted to prove there was nothing inside. I didn't want to go, but he teased me until I agreed. We planned to go late at night after our parents were asleep. We took 2 flashlights, some snacks, and our phones. I remember how quiet the streets were as we walked to the hospital. The air felt heavy, and the only sound was our footsteps, on the pavement. The hospital gates were locked, but Ji-hoon found a hole in the fence. We squeezed through and stood in front of the entrance. The glass doors were dirty and covered in dust, but they opened when we pushed. Inside, the air was cold and smelled like mold. The lobby was empty, except for some broken chairs and old magazines on the floor. Our flashlights made long shadows on the walls. We walked down a hallway lined with empty rooms. Some doors were open, others closed. The walls were covered in faded posters and peeling paint. I felt like someone was watching us, but Ji-hoon just laughed. He said ghosts weren't real and told me to relax. We found a staircase and went up to the second floor. There were more rooms, some with old beds, and dusty curtains. In one room, I saw a wheelchair tipped over on its side. Ji-hoon wanted to find the operating room. He said that's where the scariest stories came from. We wandered around, passing by broken sinks and empty medicine cabinets. Suddenly, we heard a noise behind us. It sounded like footsteps. I turned around, but no one was there. Ji-hoon said, "It was just the building settling, but I wasn't so sure." We found the operating room at the end of a long hallway. The door was half open. Inside, there was a big metal table in the center and old lights hanging from the ceiling. The walls were stained and there were rusty tools on a tray. I felt a chill run down my back. Ji-hoon walked in first and shined his flashlight around. He joked about taking a selfie, but I said no. As he looked around, I heard whispers. At first, I thought it was the wind, but then I realized the words were in Korean, soft and quick, like someone was praying. Ji-hoon didn't seem to hear them, but I did. I told him we should leave, but he wanted to explore more. He opened a cabinet, and something fell out. A piece of white cloth stained with dark spots. Ji-hoon picked it up and laughed, saying it was just an old bandage. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. Our flashlights flickered. I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow and heavy. Ji-hoon tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, and I could feel cold air swirling around us. I saw a shadow move across the wall, tall and thin. It stopped near the table and seemed to stare at us. Ji-hoon tried to act brave, but I could see he was scared. He called out, asking if anyone was there. There was no answer, just the sound of the whispers. Then, the lights above. The table flickered on for a second, even though there was no electricity. In that moment, I saw a figure standing by the table. She wore a hospital gown, her hair was long and messy, and her face was pale with dark eyes. She looked at us and opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I froze. Ji-hoon grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door. He kicked it and finally it opened. We ran down the hallway, not looking back. The whispers followed us, echoing through the empty rooms. We ran down the stairs and out into the lobby. The doors were still open and we didn't stop until we were outside the fence. We didn't say anything on the way home. My hands were shaking and Ji-hoon's face was pale. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman's face. I heard the whispers in my dreams. The next morning, Ji-hoon said he didn't remember much, just that he felt cold and tired. For the next few days, strange things happened. Our phones had pictures we didn't take, blurry photos of the hospital, and in some of them, a shadowy figure stood in the background. At night, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Ji-hoon said he saw someone standing at the end of his bed, but when he turned on the light, no one was there. We told our parents we had gone to the park, not the hospital, but my aunt knew something was wrong. She took us to a small temple near our house. The monk there gave us charms to wear and told us to pray every night. He said the hospital was a place where many people had suffered and their spirits might still be there. I wore the charm and tried to forget what happened. But some nights, I still heard the whispers. Sometimes I saw a pale face in the window. Ji-hoon stopped talking about ghosts and became quiet. He didn't want to go out at night anymore. A week later, we heard that someone else had tried to explore the hospital. They said a boy got lost inside and was found hours later, confused and shaking. After that, the city put up new fences and warning signs. People stayed away. Even now, when I walk past that part of town, I feel cold. The hospital is still there, empty and dark. I wonder if the woman in the operating room is still waiting for someone to visit. I hope nobody else goes inside. Some places should be left alone. But sometimes, late at night, I hear soft footsteps outside my window and a faint whisper in the dark. I hold my charm and close my eyes, hoping the spirits will leave me alone. When I was a university student in Bangkok, I joined a group of friends who liked exploring old places. One weekend, we heard about a temple on the edge of the city that was said to be haunted. It was called Wat Prang Noi, and people said strange things happened there after dark. Some locals believed the temple was cursed because it was built on land where villagers once disappeared during a flood many years ago. We decided to visit the temple late in the afternoon. The sun was starting to set as we arrived. The place looked abandoned. The paint on the temple walls was peeling, and weeds grew between the cracks of the stone path. There was a big Bodhi tree in the courtyard, its branches heavy with old prayer, ribbons, and faded talismans. The air felt sticky and still. My friend Somchai laughed and said, "Ghosts are just stories to scare kids." But I felt uneasy. The main hall of the temple was locked, but there was a side door that hung open. We stepped inside. The floor creaked and the air was cool and musty. Old statues of Buddha stood in the shadows, their faces worn smooth by time. There were old offerings on the altar, dried flowers, melted candles, and a bowl of rice gone, hard with age. As we walked deeper into the hall, I noticed a mural on the wall. It showed people crossing a river, their faces twisted in fear. At the edge of the painting, shadowy figures waded in the water. I shivered but tried to act normal. Somchai wanted to explore the back of the temple, where the monks used to live. We followed him through a narrow hallway. The doors to the monks' rooms were open, and inside we saw old robes and empty beds. The smell of incense lingered in the air. Suddenly, we heard a soft sound behind us, like someone sweeping the floor. We turned, but no one was there. My friend May whispered, "Let's go back." But Somchai said, "We just got here." He led us outside to the courtyard. The sun had almost set. The shadows stretched long across the ground. I glanced at the Bodhi tree and saw something moving in the branches. At first I thought it was a bird, but then I saw a pale face watching us from between the leaves. I blinked and it was gone. May grabbed my arm. "Did you see that?" she whispered. I nodded, my heart pounding. Somchai said we were just seeing things because it was getting dark. He wanted to look around the old bell tower. The bell tower stood at the far end of the temple grounds. The stairs were broken, but Somchai climbed up anyway. The rest of us waited below. As he reached the top, the old bell began to swing on its own. The sound was soft at first, then grew louder. The air turned cold. We called for Somchai to come down, but he didn't answer. Suddenly he screamed. We rushed up the stairs, careful not to fall. At the top, we found Somchai sitting on the floor, shaking. He pointed to the corner. There was nothing there, but Somchai said he saw a woman in white, her face hidden by long hair. She whispered his name and told him to leave. We hurried down and ran back to the main hall. The sky was almost black now. We decided it was time to go. As we walked to the gate, the bells in the temple grounds started to ring, one after another, though no one was there to ring them. We ran down the road, not stopping until we reached the main street. Somchai was pale and silent. That night, he had a fever and kept mumbling in his sleep. He said the woman from the bell tower kept calling him, asking him to come back. The next day, we visited a monk at a nearby temple. He listened to our story and nodded. He said spirits sometimes linger where there is pain or unfinished business. He gave Somchai a small amulet and told him to pray every night. For a few days, things were quiet. Then Somchai started seeing the woman in white in his dreams. She stood at the foot of his bed, her face hidden, her voice soft and sad. He tried to ignore her, but she followed him everywhere, in reflections, in crowds, even in the university library. One evening, Somchai disappeared. We searched everywhere but couldn't find him. His phone was off and no one had seen him since class. We went back to Wat Prang Noi, hoping he might have returned there. The temple was even more silent than before. We searched the grounds calling his name. At the bell tower we found his backpack and shoes. The bell was swinging gently though there was no wind. May started to cry. Suddenly I heard a whisper behind me. I turned and saw the woman in white standing under the Bodhi tree, her face still hidden by her hair. She lifted her hand and pointed at the river behind the temple. We walked to the riverbank. The water was dark and slow. In the mud we found footprints leading into the water but none coming back. We called the police but they never found Somchai. The monk said a prayer for him and we left offerings at the temple. But I still dream of that night. Sometimes I hear the bell ringing in my sleep and I see the woman in white standing at the edge of the water, waiting. People in Thailand say that some spirits cannot move on until their story is told or someone remembers them. I think about the mural in the temple, the faces of the people crossing the river, and the shadows waiting in the water. Maybe the temple really was cursed, or maybe it was just a place where sadness stayed behind. After that, I stopped exploring old places. I still pass by Wat Prang Noi sometimes, but I never go inside. The Bodhi tree still stands in the courtyard, covered in faded ribbons. Sometimes I think I see someone watching from the branches, but I never look too closely. The sound of bells makes me uneasy now, and I always walk a little faster when I hear them. My friends and I don't talk about what happened. May moved away, and the others pretend nothing happened. But sometimes, late at night, I get messages from an unknown number. They only say, "Come back." I delete them, but they always return. I wonder if Somchai is still out there, lost between worlds, or if he finally found peace. I hope the woman in white has stopped waiting. But I still dream of the river, the temple, and the sound of bells in the dark. When I was a child, my family moved to a small town in Japan. My father got a new job, and we had to leave Tokyo for this quiet place in the countryside. Our new house was old, much older than any place I had ever lived before. The wood was dark and creaked when you walked. The windows rattled in the wind. There was a small garden in the back overgrown with weeds and moss. My parents said it was a traditional house with character, but to me it felt lonely. The neighbors told us that our house used to belong to an old woman. She lived there alone for many years until she passed away. Some people said she was kind, but others whispered that she was strange. They said she talked to herself and never let anyone inside. I tried not to think about it, but at night, when the wind blew through the cracks, I imagined her still walking through the halls. My room was upstairs at the end of a narrow hallway. The first night I heard footsteps outside my door. I thought it was my mother, but when I opened the door, no one was there. The hallway was empty and cold. I went back to bed and pulled the covers over my head. Strange things started happening after that. Sometimes I woke up and found my window open, even though I was sure I had closed it. I heard whispering in the wall, soft and quick, like someone telling secrets. My toys moved by themselves. Once I found my favorite stuffed animal sitting in the hallway facing the stairs. I told my parents, but they just smiled and said the house was old and made strange noises. My father said I was just nervous about moving. I tried to believe him, but every night the feeling grew stronger. Someone else was in the house with us. One evening, my parents went out for dinner and left me home alone. I tried to watch TV, but the screen kept flickering. I heard footsteps upstairs, slow and heavy. I called out, thinking maybe my parents had come back, but no one answered. The footsteps stopped above me. I turned off the TV and listened. There was a soft humming sound, like an old woman singing to herself. I climbed the stairs, each step creaking under my feet. The hallway was darker than usual. The door to my room was open. I saw a shadow move inside. My heart pounded. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I stood in the doorway and saw an old woman sitting on my bed. Her hair was long and gray, and her back was turned to me. She was humming the same song I had heard. I tried to speak, but my voice was gone. The woman turned her head slowly. Her face was pale, her eyes dark and empty. She whispered something I couldn't understand. I felt cold all over. She reached out her hand and I stepped back, almost falling. Suddenly, the light in the hallway flickered and she vanished. I ran downstairs and waited by the door until my parents came home. After that night, I refused to sleep in my room. My parents finally believed me when they started hearing things too. My mother saw shadows moving in the garden. My father heard someone calling his name late at night. We all felt watched. One morning, we found muddy footprints in the hallway. They were small, like a child's, but no children had visited. My mother found her favorite vase broken on the floor, though no one had touched it. At night, we heard crying coming from the attic. My father called a local priest to bless the house. He walked through each room, chanting and burning incense. When he reached my room, the incense smoke turned black and thick. The priest said the spirit in our house was not angry, just lonely. He told us to treat her with respect, to leave offerings of food and water, and to talk kindly to her. We started leaving rice and tea in the hallway every night. The strange noises grew softer. The crying stopped. Sometimes, I saw the old woman standing in the garden, looking at the flowers. She never came inside again. For a while, things felt peaceful. But one rainy night, I heard a new voice. It was higher, like a child's. I followed the sound to the attic. The door was open, though we always kept it locked. I climbed the stairs, flashlight shaking in my hand. The attic was cold and dark. I saw a small figure in the corner, sitting on an old trunk. It was a little girl, her hair tangled and her dress dirty. She looked up at me with wide, sad eyes. She said, "I'm lost. Can you help me find my mother?" I wanted to run, but I felt sorry for her. I asked her name, but she didn't answer. She just kept repeating, "Help me find my mother." I reached out my hand, but she vanished like smoke. After that, the house felt different. The old woman's spirit was calm, but now the little girl wandered the halls. She cried at night, called out for her mother, and sometimes left small handprints on the windows. My parents thought about moving, but we stayed. We left offerings for both spirits. We talked to them, wished them peace, and tried not to be afraid. Some nights I heard the old woman and the little girl singing together. The house still felt strange, but not as lonely. Years later, after we moved away, I heard the new family who lived there had the same experiences. They saw the old woman in the garden and heard the little girl in the attic. The house never felt empty, no matter who lived there. Sometimes I dream about that house. I walk through the dark hallways, hear the humming and the crying, and feel the cold air on my skin. I wonder if the spirits ever found what they were looking for, or if they are still waiting, walking the old wooden floors, watching from the shadows. My uncle was sick for a long time, so I spent many nights at the hospital in Busan. The building was old, with yellow lights and long, empty halls. The walls were white but stained, and the smell of medicine was always in the air. My uncle stayed in a small room on the 7th floor. My parents took turns staying with him, but sometimes I had to stay alone. One night, my uncle was sleeping, and my parents had gone home to rest. The nurse told me I could sleep on the small sofa in the room. I tried to sleep, but the wind outside was loud and the hospital felt colder than usual. I heard footsteps in the hallway, but when I looked, no one was there. The clock on the wall ticked slowly. I closed my eyes and tried to ignore the strange feeling in my stomach. Around midnight, I woke up to a soft sound. It was like someone whispering outside the door. I thought it was a nurse, but when I stood up and opened the door, the hallway was empty. The lights flickered, and I saw a shadow move past the end of the hall. I closed the door quickly and went back to the sofa. A little while later, I heard the sound again. This time, it was coming from the window. I looked outside, but all I could see was the city and the dark sky. I started to feel afraid. My uncle was still sleeping, and I didn't want to wake him. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. Suddenly, the lights in the room went out. The hallway lights were still on, but our room was dark. I heard something move near the bed. I whispered, "Uncle?" But he didn't answer. I listened carefully. There was a soft breathing sound, but it wasn't my uncle. It was too close to me. I got up and reached for my phone, but it slipped from my hand and fell under the sofa. As I bent down to look for it, I heard someone whisper my name. The voice was thin and cold. I froze. The voice came from behind me. I turned around slowly, but I couldn't see anyone. The room was too dark. Then I saw a pale face in the window. It was a young woman, her hair long and black, her eyes wide and sad. She was looking at me from the other side of the glass. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. The woman pressed her hand against the window. Her fingers were thin and white. She opened her mouth, but I couldn't hear her voice. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. When I opened them, she was gone. The lights came back on. My uncle was still asleep. I sat on the sofa, shaking. I tried to tell myself it was a dream, but I couldn't forget her face. The next morning, I told the nurse what happened. She looked at me for a long time, then said, "You should not look out the window at night." Later that day, I asked another nurse if anyone had died in this room. She said many people had passed away on this floor, but she didn't know about my room. She told me old hospitals sometimes keep memories, and sometimes those memories come back. That night, my parents stayed with me. I felt safer, but I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the window. I watched the glass carefully, but nothing happened. My uncle's condition got worse, and the doctors moved him to another room on the same floor. The new room was smaller, and the window looked out over the parking lot. On the first night there, I woke up to the sound of crying. It was soft and far away, but it made my skin crawl. I listened, trying to find where it was coming from. The sound seemed to move down the hallway, stopping at each door. When it reached our room, it stopped. I held my breath. The doorknob turned slowly, but the door didn't open. After a few minutes, the crying moved away. I told my mother, but she said I was just tired. She told me to pray and try to sleep. But every night the crying came back. Sometimes I heard footsteps outside, slow and heavy. Sometimes I saw shadows moving under the door. I started to feel sick. I didn't want to stay in the hospital anymore. One evening, my uncle woke up and told me he saw a woman standing at the foot of his bed. He said she was dressed in white and her hair covered her face. She didn't speak, but she watched him for a long time. He said he felt cold and couldn't move until she disappeared. My parents thought he was dreaming, but I believed him. After that, my uncle's health got worse. He became weaker every day. The doctors said they were doing everything they could, but I felt the hospital was making him sicker. I wanted to take him home, but the doctors said it was too dangerous. One night, I stayed up late, watching my uncle sleep. The room was quiet, except for the sound of his breathing. Suddenly, the temperature dropped. I saw my breath in the air. I heard the crying again, louder this time. The door creaked open by itself, and the woman from the window stepped inside. She moved slowly, her feet not touching the floor. Her dress was torn and dirty. Her hair hung over her face, but I could see her eyes. They were full of sadness. She stopped at my uncle's bed and looked at me. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. She reached out her hand and touched my uncle's forehead. He shivered, then stopped breathing. I screamed for help. The nurses came running, but it was too late. My uncle was gone. The woman disappeared, as quickly as she had come. The nurses tried to comfort me, but I couldn't stop crying. I knew what I saw was real. After my uncle's funeral, I refused to go back to the hospital. My parents said I was just tired and sad, but I knew the truth. Sometimes when I walk past the hospital, I see a face in the window. It's always the same woman, watching, waiting. People say hospitals are places of healing, but I know they can also be places where lost souls wander. I still dream about that night. I hear the crying and see the woman's sad eyes. I hope she finds peace one day, but I am afraid she never will. It was a humid night in Kuala Lumpur when I found myself stuck at the bus terminal. My bus home was delayed and the station was nearly empty. Most of the shops had closed and only a few people waited on the benches, lost in their own worlds. I checked my phone, but the battery was almost dead. I felt bored and a little uneasy, so I decided to find the restroom. Maybe washing my face would help me feel less tired. The restroom was at the far end of the station, past some vending machines and an old newspaper stand. The lights in the hallway flickered, and the air smelled like cleaning chemicals mixed with something sour. I pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The sound of the outside world faded away, replaced by the steady drip of a leaking tap. Inside, the restroom was cold and quiet. There were 3 stalls and 2 sinks. The mirrors above the sinks were streaked with water stains. I chose the sink on the left and turned on the tap. The water was cold and I splashed it on my face. I looked up at my reflection and for a moment, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. I spun around, but the restroom was empty. I laughed at myself, thinking it was just my imagination. I dried my face and turned off the tap. As I walked toward the door, I heard a soft sound from the last stall. It sounded like someone crying. At first, I thought maybe someone was sick or upset. I hesitated, not sure if I should ask if they were okay. The crying continued, soft but steady. I called out, "Are you all right?" There was no answer, just more crying. I waited for a moment, feeling awkward. Then the crying stopped. The silence was heavy. I turned to leave, but the door to the last stall creaked open. I froze. A pale hand reached out, gripping the edge of the door. Slowly, a woman stepped out. Her long black hair was wet and hung over her face. She wore a white dress which was stained and dirty. Her feet were bare and she left wet footprints on the floor. She didn't look at me. Instead, she shuffled to the sink next to mine and stared into the mirror. I felt a chill run down my back. Something about her felt wrong, but I couldn't move. The woman lifted her head, and I saw her face in the mirror. Her eyes were dark and empty, and her mouth was twisted in a sad smile. She reached up and touched, her cheek leaving a bloody streak on the glass. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't work. The woman turned to me and whispered, "Can you help me?" Her voice was soft, almost like a child's. She stepped closer and I smelled something rotten like old flowers left in the sun. She reached out and grabbed my arm. Her fingers were ice cold. I tried to pull away, but she held on tight. "Please," she said, "I can't find my way home." Her grip grew stronger and her nails dug into my skin. I cried out, but no sound came from my mouth. The lights flickered and the air grew colder. I looked into her eyes and saw only darkness. Suddenly, the restroom door banged open. Someone walked in, talking loudly on their phone. The woman let go of my arm and vanished. I stumbled back, gasping for air. The man at the door stared at me, confused. I rushed past him and out into the hallway, my heart pounding. I didn't look back. I ran to the main waiting area and sat down, shaking. My arm still felt cold where she had touched me. I checked for marks, but there was nothing. My phone buzzed. The battery was almost dead, but I saw a new message. It was just one word: help. I looked around. No one seemed to notice me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, or maybe I had fallen asleep and dreamed the whole thing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me out of the restroom. The bus finally arrived. I got on and found a seat near the window. The city lights blurred as we drove away from the station. I kept checking my phone, but the message was gone. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in the mirror. The next day, I told my friends what happened. They laughed and said I was just tired. But one of them, Amir, looked serious. He said there were stories about that bus station. Years ago, a woman had died in the restroom after waiting all night for a bus that never came. People said her spirit still wandered the station, looking for help. I tried to forget, but strange things kept happening. Sometimes I heard crying in the night even when I was alone in my room. Once I found wet footprints in my bathroom leading to the mirror. My phone would buzz with strange messages, always at night, always just one word: help. I stopped using public restrooms for a while. I was afraid I would see her again. But one evening, I had no choice. I was out with friends at a night market, and I really needed to go. The only restroom was behind the food stalls, dark and dirty. I told myself it would be fine. Inside, the lights flickered just like before. The air was thick and damp. I used the toilet quickly and tried not to look in the mirror. As I washed my hands, I heard the sound of crying from one of the stalls. My heart raced. I wanted to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. I finished washing my hands and left without looking back. But the crying followed me. I heard it in my dreams, in the silence of the night, and even in crowded places. Sometimes I saw her face in reflections, watching me with sad eyes. I knew she wanted help, but I didn't know what to do. One night I decided to go back to the bus station. I thought maybe if I faced her, she would leave me alone. The station was quiet, just like before. I walked down the hallway to the restroom. The door was heavy and the air inside was cold. I stood by the sink and waited. After a few minutes, I heard the crying again. This time, I didn't run. I called out, "What do you want?" The crying stopped. The woman stepped out of the last stall, her hair covering her face. She pointed to the mirror. "Look," she whispered. I looked into the mirror and saw not only my own reflection but hers standing behind me. She reached out, and our hands touched the glass. I felt a wave of sadness, like a memory that wasn't mine. I saw flashes of her waiting for someone who never came, her hope turning to despair, her loneliness filling the empty restroom. She whispered, "Don't forget me." Then she faded away and the room grew warm again. I stood there for a long time, staring at my reflection. I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. After that night, the strange messages stopped. I no longer heard crying in the dark. Sometimes, I still think about her, the woman in the restroom who just wanted someone to remember her. Now when I see someone alone and sad, I try to help. Maybe that's what she wanted all along. When I was a university student in Taiwan, my friends liked to talk about haunted places. There was an old abandoned factory near our city, just outside the edge of town. People said it used to make shoes, but after a big fire, it was closed and left empty. Some said the fire was an accident, others whispered it was caused by something strange. At night, the factory looked dark and lonely, with broken windows and tall grass all around. No one wanted to go near it, but my friends thought it would be fun to explore. One evening, my friend Ming suggested we visit the factory. He said if we took some photos inside, maybe we could find a ghost. I was scared, but everyone else was excited. There were 5 of us. Ming, his girlfriend Yating, 2 other boys named Jun and Wei, and me. We brought flashlights, our phones, and a bag of snacks. We met at the bus stop and walked together along the quiet road. The air smelled damp and the sky was turning dark. The factory was bigger than I expected. The main gate was locked, but someone had already cut a hole in the fence. We climbed through and stood in front of the building. The walls were black from smoke, and the windows were covered with dust. Ming laughed and said, "Let's go in." He pushed open a side door and we followed him inside. The air was cold and heavy. We could hear water dripping somewhere. Our footsteps echoed on the concrete floor. Old machines and broken tables were left everywhere. Some shoes and boxes were still on the shelves, covered in ash. We took pictures and tried to act brave, but I felt nervous. Yating held my hand and whispered, "Don't leave me alone." We explored the main room, then found a staircase going up. The steps creaked as we climbed. On the second floor, there were offices with broken glass and burned papers. I saw a calendar on the wall, the date frozen many years ago. Jun picked up a shoe and joked that maybe it belonged to a ghost. Suddenly, we heard a loud bang downstairs. We all stopped talking and listened. The sound did not come again. Wei said it was just the wind, but Ming wanted to check. We went back down, but saw nothing strange. Still, I felt something was wrong. The shadows seemed to move, and I thought I saw a face in the darkness. I told myself it was just my imagination. We walked deeper into the factory. There was a long hallway with doors on both sides. Some doors were open, others were locked. We peeked into one room and saw old uniforms hanging on the wall. Another room was full of broken chairs and empty boxes. The last door at the end of the hallway was half open. Ming pushed it and it creaked loudly. Inside, it was darker than the rest of the factory. Our flashlights showed a small room with a big metal machine in the middle. The machine was covered in black stains. Yating said she felt cold, and I could see her breath in the air. Jun laughed and said, "Maybe this is where the fire started." Wei wanted to leave, but Ming said, "Let's stay a little longer." Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us. We all jumped and turned around. The handle would not move. Ming tried to open it, but it was stuck. I felt panic rising in my chest. The air got colder, and I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like someone calling my name, but it was so soft I could barely hear it. Yating started to cry. Jun pounded on the door, but it would not open. Wei's flashlight flickered and went out. We stood in the dark, only Ming's light still working. I heard footsteps on the floor above us, slow and heavy. It sounded like someone was walking, dragging something behind them. Ming shone his flashlight around the room. In one corner, I saw a shadow move. It looked like a person, but when I blinked, it was gone. The whispering got louder. I could hear words now, but they were in a strange language. The cold grew sharper, making my skin hurt. Suddenly, the machine in the middle of the room made a loud noise like metal scraping metal. The shadow appeared again, closer this time. It looked like a woman. Her face burned and twisted. Her eyes were empty, and her mouth was open in a silent scream. She reached out her hand, and I felt a freezing pain on my arm. Yating screamed. Jun and Wei tried to break down the door. Ming pointed his flashlight at the ghost, but the light flickered and died. We were in total darkness. I could feel the woman's hand on my arm burning cold. The whispering was all around us now, angry and sad. Suddenly, the door flew open. We stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for air. The lights in the hallway flickered. I looked back and saw the woman's shadow standing in the doorway watching us. Her eyes glowed in the dark. We ran down the hallway, not stopping until we reached the exit. Outside, the air felt warm and safe. We climbed through the fence and ran all the way to the bus stop. No one spoke. Yating was shaking, and Jun's hands were bleeding from hitting the door. On the bus, I looked at my arm. There was a red mark where the ghost had touched me, shaped like a hand. That night, I could not sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her burned face. I heard the whispers in my dreams calling my name. The next day, Ming called me. He said his flashlight was broken, and his phone had strange photos on it. There were pictures of us in the factory, but in some of them, a shadowy figure stood behind us. Yating said she kept hearing someone crying at night. Jun's hands would not stop shaking. We refused to talk about what happened. Over the next week, strange things happened to all of us. I saw the burned woman's face in mirrors and windows. Yating found black stains on her pillow. Ming's room smelled like smoke, even though he did not smoke. Jun said he heard footsteps outside his door every night. Wei moved to another city and blocked all of us. I went to a temple with my parents. The priest gave me a charm and told me to pray. I still had the mark on my arm, and it hurt when I touched it. At night, I heard the whispers again, closer than before. I dreamed I was back in the factory, lost in the dark, with the burned woman waiting for me. One day, I woke up and saw the mark on my arm had turned black. My mother was worried and took me to a doctor, but the doctor could not explain it. That night, I heard someone calling my name outside the window. I was too scared to look. I called Ming and told him about the mark. He said his phone had stopped working and Yating was in the hospital. She would not wake up, just like she was trapped in a dream. Jun was not answering his phone. I felt alone and scared. At midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My door slowly opened, and I saw the burned woman standing there. She whispered my name, her voice cold and sad. I could not move or speak. She reached out her hand, and I felt the cold again. The next morning, my mother found me on the floor. The black mark was gone, but I felt weak and empty. I tried to tell her what happened, but she did not believe me. I knew the ghost had taken something from me, something I could never get back. After that, I stayed away from the factory. I told others not to go near it. Some nights I still hear the whispers, and sometimes I see the burned woman's face in my dreams. I pray she will leave me alone, but I know she is still there, waiting in the darkness, inside the old abandoned factory. It was always hot in Kuala Lumpur, but that night, the air in the underground parking lot felt even heavier than usual. I had just finished working late at the office, and the building was almost empty. My car was parked on the lowest level, floor 3, because all the other spots were taken in the morning. The elevator was slow, so I took the stairs down. The lights flickered as I walked, and the sound of my shoes echoed off the concrete walls. I never liked the parking lot at night. It was always too quiet, and the shadows seemed to move. As I reached P3, I noticed a strange smell, like something old and rotten. I tried not to think about it and hurried to my car. My footsteps sounded too loud, and I kept glancing over my shoulder. When I reached my car, I saw something strange on the ground next to it. There was a red string tied in a neat circle. In Malaysia, people sometimes use red string for prayers or to keep away bad luck. But this one looked fresh, like someone had just left it there. I bent down to pick it up, but as my fingers touched the string, I heard a soft whisper behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. The rows of cars were silent and empty. I laughed at myself, thinking it was just my imagination. I unlocked my car and got in, but when I tried to start the engine, nothing happened. The lights on the dashboard blinked, then went out. I tried again, but the car was dead. The air inside the car felt cold. I reached for my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. I looked outside and saw the red string still lying there, now stretched out in a straight line leading toward the far end of the parking lot. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, but curiosity got the better of me. I got out and followed the string. It led me past empty cars and dark corners. The smell grew stronger, and I started to hear faint footsteps behind me, but every time I turned around, nothing was there. The string ended at a pillar, where I saw a small, old mirror hanging from a nail. On the mirror, someone had written words in red. "Don't look back." My heart started to race. I could feel eyes on me, but I forced myself to look at the mirror. My own face stared back, but behind me I saw a shadow that wasn't mine. It was tall and thin, with long hair covering its face. I spun around, but the space was empty. Suddenly the lights went out. I was alone in the dark. I fumbled for my phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. I tried to remember the way back to my car, but the parking lot felt different, like the walls had moved. I started to walk, feeling my way along the cold concrete. My hands brushed against something wet and sticky. I pulled back, but it was too dark to see what it was. I heard the whisper again, closer this time. It sounded like a woman's voice speaking in Malay, but I couldn't understand the words. I started to run, but the footsteps behind me grew louder. I tripped over something and fell hard. My hands landed on the red string now wrapped around my wrists. I tried to pull it off, but it tightened. The whisper turned into a cry. I looked up and saw a figure standing in front of me. She wore a white dress stained with something dark. Her hair hung over her face, and her feet didn't touch the ground. She reached out to me, her fingers long and thin. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. She leaned closer, and I saw her mouth moving. She was crying, asking for help, but her voice was broken and full of pain. I closed my eyes and begged her to go away. When I opened them again, she was gone. The lights flickered back on, and I was alone. I ran to my car, shaking. The red string was gone. My car started right away, and my phone had a signal again. I drove home as fast as I could, but I kept checking the rearview mirror, afraid I would see her face. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the woman in white. In Malaysia, people talk about the Pontianak, the ghost of a woman who died in pain. I wondered if that was who I saw. The next day, I told my friends what happened. They told me to burn incense and pray, just in case. For a while, nothing strange happened. But one night, as I walked to my car, I saw the red string again, this time tied to my door handle. I froze. I wanted to leave, but I needed my car. I quickly pulled the string off and threw it away. When I got in, the air smelled sweet like flowers, but there was a cold spot on the back seat. I drove home with the windows down, trying not to think about it, but from then on, I always felt like someone was watching me. Sometimes I heard soft whispers when I was alone. Sometimes I found red string in strange places, on my desk at work, tied to my front gate, even wrapped around my pillow. I tried to ignore it, but the dreams started. In my dreams, I was back in the parking lot. The woman in white waited for me, her hair covering her face. She reached out and I couldn't move. I woke up sweating and scared every night. One day I visited a temple with my aunt. She saw I looked tired and asked what was wrong. When I told her, she frowned and said I had to make an offering to the spirits. She gave me a small bag of rice and told me to leave it in the parking lot with a prayer. That night I did as she said. I placed the rice near the pillar where I found the mirror and whispered a prayer for peace. The air felt lighter when I left. For a few days, nothing happened. I thought maybe it was over, but a week later I found a new message scratched into my car door. Help me. The letters were deep and jagged. I tried to wash them off, but they wouldn't go away. That night I heard crying outside my window. I looked out and saw a woman in white standing under the streetlight, her head hanging low. I shut the curtains and tried to sleep, but the crying grew louder. I covered my ears, but it didn't help. In the morning she was gone, but the grass where she stood was dead and black. I started to see her everywhere. In reflections, in shadows, even in crowds. No one else seemed to notice. I stopped sleeping. My friends said I looked sick. I tried to explain, but they thought I was just stressed. One night I decided to face her. I went back to the parking lot, this time with incense and offerings. I called out, asking what she wanted. The lights flickered, and I saw her standing. By the pillar, she pointed to the ground. I walked over and saw a small old photograph half buried in the dirt. It showed a young woman smiling, wearing the same white dress. I picked it up and the air turned cold. The woman's voice filled my head. She told me her name was Nurul. She said she died here, alone, and no one helped her. She wanted someone to remember her, to pray for her. I promised I would. I burned incense and prayed for her soul. The coldness faded, and I felt a strange peace. When I left, the parking lot felt brighter. My car started without trouble. That night, I slept for a year. The first time in weeks. After that, I visited Nurul's spot every month. I brought flowers, incense, and rice. I prayed for her. The red string stopped appearing. The whispers faded. I still saw her sometimes, but she only watched from a distance. I wasn't afraid anymore. People in Malaysia say, the dead only haunt, the living when they are forgotten. I think Nurul just wanted someone to care. Now when I walk through the parking lot at night, I feel a gentle breeze instead of fear. I remember her, and I hope she finally found peace. It was a humid evening in Taiwan, and the air felt thick with anticipation. I had come to explore an old abandoned building in Tainan, a city rich in history and ghost stories. The locals often spoke of the building as haunted, filled with the spirits of those who had once lived there. I was curious and a bit nervous, but I couldn't resist the adventure. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement as I approached the entrance. The building loomed before me, its windows dark and empty. Vines crawled up the walls and the paint was peeling away, revealing the gray concrete beneath. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. It creaked loudly, echoing in the stillness. Inside, the air was stale and musty. Dust hung in the air, catching the last rays of sunlight. I stepped inside, my footsteps disturbing the silence. The floorboards groaned under my weight. I felt a chill run down my spine. I was alone, but it felt like I wasn't. As I wandered through the dim hallways, I noticed old photographs hanging on the walls. They were faded and yellowed, showing families that once lived here. Their faces looked sad, as if they were trapped in time. I paused to study one photo. It showed a little girl with big, dark eyes. She seemed to be staring right at me. I shivered and moved on. I entered a large room that must have been a living room. There were remnants of old furniture scattered around. A broken chair lay on its side and a dusty table stood in the corner. I walked over to the table and brushed off the dust. Underneath, I found a small diary. The cover was worn, but I could still make out the initials LY. I opened it and began to read. The entries were filled with tales of joy and sadness. The last entry sent chills through me. It spoke of a stormy night when strange noises filled the house. The girl LY wrote about feeling watched. She mentioned a shadow that moved in the corners of her vision. I closed the diary, feeling uneasy. What had happened to her? Suddenly I heard a noise behind me. It was faint, like a whisper. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room and the shadows creeping along the walls. My heart raced. I decided to leave the room, but as I turned, I saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a girl, dressed in an old-fashioned white dress. Her hair was long and unkempt, and her eyes were wide and empty. I froze, unable to move. She just stood there, staring at me. I wanted to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I blinked, and she was gone. I gasped, my heart pounding in my chest. I stumbled back into the living room, trying to calm myself. It was just my imagination, I told myself. I needed to get out of there. As I turned to leave, I heard the whisper, again. "Help me." It was coming from the hallway. I hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. I had to know more. I stepped cautiously toward the sound, my heart racing. The hallway was dark, the shadows deepening as I moved closer. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, sending chills down my spine. The whisper grew louder, almost pleading. "Help me." I reached the end of the hallway and found a door slightly ajar. It was the only door I hadn't opened. I pushed it gently, and it creaked open. Inside was a small room, filled with old toys and broken furniture. In the corner, I saw the girl. Again, she was sitting on the floor, her head down. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice shaking. "I can't leave," she replied, her voice soft and sad. "I'm trapped." "Trapped? How?" I asked, feeling a mix of fear and pity. "My family, they left me. I waited for them, but they never came back." Tears streamed down her pale cheeks. "I need someone to remember me, to help me find peace." I felt a wave of sympathy wash over me. "What can I do?" I asked. "Find my family," she whispered. "They lived here long ago. They might still be close." I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose. "I will help you," I promised. "I will find them." As I turned to leave the room, I felt a rush of cold air. The girl's voice echoed in my mind. "Thank you." I stepped back into the hallway, determined to uncover the truth. I searched the building looking for any clues about her family. I found more photographs, each one telling a piece of the story. I learned that the girl's name was Leon, and her family had lived in this house many years ago. They had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. I found an old newspaper article crumpled in a drawer. It spoke of a tragic accident that had taken place nearby. A family had been involved, and they had never been found. My heart sank. Could this be Leon's family? I rushed back to the small room. "Leon," I called out. "I think I found something." But when I entered, the room was empty. The toys lay scattered, but the girl was gone. Panic surged through me. "Leon, where are you?" I searched frantically, calling her name. I felt a sense of dread creeping in. Had I lost her? I stumbled back into the hallway, feeling the walls closing in around me. The air was thick, and the shadows seemed to stretch toward me. "Help me," I heard her whisper again. But this time it felt distant, almost fading. I followed the sound, my heart racing. I ran through the building, searching every corner. The whispers grew fainter, and I felt a sense of desperation. Finally, I found myself in the living room again. I collapsed onto the floor, feeling defeated. I had promised to help her, but I couldn't even find her. I closed my eyes, trying to calm my racing heart. Then, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. I opened my eyes and turned around. Leon stood there, her eyes filled with sorrow. "You must find my family," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "Please." "I will," I promised again, feeling a surge of determination. "I won't give up." As I stood up, I noticed something glimmering on the floor. It was a small locket, half buried in the dust. I picked it up, and when I opened it, I saw two tiny pictures inside. One was of Leon, and the other was of a woman who looked just like her. "Your mother?" I asked softly. "Yes," she whispered. She was beautiful. I felt a connection to her. "I will find her," I said firmly. "I will make sure you are not forgotten." With newfound strength, I began to search the building again. I had a name now, a face. I needed to find more information about Leon's family. I found another article, this one detailing the family's last known whereabouts. They had lived in a nearby village. I knew I had to go there. "Leon, I'll find them," I said, feeling a sense of hope. "I'll bring them back to you." "Thank you," she said, her voice fading. "I will wait for you." I rushed out of the building, the night air cool against my skin. I made my way to the village, determined to uncover the truth. I would find Leon's family and help her find peace. The stars twinkled above me as I walked, and I felt a sense of purpose. I would not let her down. I would bring her family back to her, no matter what it took. My name is Eric. I was born and raised in Taiwan, in a small city not far from the mountains. When I was in high school, my friends and I loved to explore strange places. There was an old abandoned hospital on the edge of our city. People said it was haunted. Some even said they heard screams at night or saw shadows in the windows. I never really believed those stories, but I was always a little curious. One summer evening, my friend Jason called me. He said, "Let's go check out the old hospital tonight. I heard there's a way inside." I hesitated, but he kept pushing. Soon, our friends Lily and Kevin joined too. We met at the corner store, bought some snacks, and rode our bikes to the hospital. The building was huge and gray, with broken windows and weeds growing everywhere. The gates were locked, but Jason found a hole in the fence. We crawled through and walked up the cracked path. The air smelled like mold and something rotten. I felt a chill, even though it was a hot night. We found a side door that was half open. Jason went first, shining his flashlight into the darkness. The hallway was covered in dust and old papers. Our footsteps echoed on the dirty floor. The walls were covered in peeling paint and graffiti. It was hard to imagine this place was once full of doctors and nurses. We walked past empty rooms filled with broken beds and old machines. Sometimes we saw old medical charts or dirty blankets left behind. Everything felt wrong, like the whole building was frozen in time. Lily said she felt like someone was watching us. I laughed, but I felt it too. We climbed the stairs to the second floor. The steps creaked under our feet. Suddenly, we heard a door slam somewhere above us. We all stopped and stared at each other. "Probably just the wind," Kevin said, but his voice was shaky. On the second floor, the air was colder. We walked down a long hallway. Most of the doors were shut, but one was open. Inside, we found an old operating room. There were rusty tools on a table and a broken lamp hanging from the ceiling. The walls were stained. I saw something dark on the floor and tried not to think about what it was. Lily took some photos, but her phone kept turning off by itself. Jason joked about ghosts, but no one laughed. Suddenly, we heard footsteps above us. They were slow and heavy, like someone dragging their feet. We all froze. The footsteps moved closer, then stopped. We decided to leave, but when we turned back, the hallway seemed longer than before. The doors we passed earlier were now closed. I felt dizzy, like the building was changing around us. Kevin tried to open one of the doors, but it was stuck. We hurried back to the stairs, but now there was a cold wind blowing up from below. We made our way down, but the ground floor looked different. The entrance was gone, replaced by a blank wall. We started to panic. Jason banged on the wall, but nothing happened. Lily started to cry. I tried to stay calm and said we should find another exit. We walked deeper into the hospital. The lights from our flashlights flickered. Shadows moved in the corners of the rooms. Sometimes I thought I saw someone standing at the end of the hallway, but when I looked again, there was nothing. We heard whispers, soft and sad, coming from behind closed doors. We found a room filled with old hospital beds. Some of them looked like they had been used recently. There were dirty sheets and pillows. I heard a soft humming sound like someone singing a lullaby. The others heard it too. We turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind us. We were trapped. The humming grew louder. I saw a shape moving between the beds. It looked like a woman in a hospital gown, her hair long and covering her face. She moved slowly, almost floating. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She whispered something, but I couldn't understand the words. Lily screamed. The woman turned toward us. Her face was pale and empty, her eyes black holes. She reached out her hand. I felt the air grow cold. Kevin grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the window. We tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Jason shouted, "Leave us alone!" The woman stopped. She tilted her head, as if she was listening. Then she let out a long, sad cry. The lights flickered and went out. We were in total darkness. I could hear her moving closer. Suddenly, the door opened by itself. We ran out, not looking back. The hallway was different again. Everything was darker. The walls were wet, and there was a smell like smoke and burned plastic. We ran down the Giao hall, turning corners, trying to find a way out. We ended up in the basement. The stairs were broken and the floor was covered in water. There were old wheelchairs and boxes stacked in the corners. We heard footsteps behind us. The woman was following. I felt her cold breath on my neck. We found a door that led to a storage room. We squeezed inside and pushed some boxes against the door. We sat in the dark, trying to catch our breath. Lily was shaking. Kevin was crying. Jason tried to call for help, but there was no signal. We waited for what felt like hours. Sometimes we heard the woman whispering outside the door. She called our names one by one. I closed my eyes and prayed she would go away. Finally, the whispers stopped. We waited a little longer, then slowly moved the boxes and opened the door. The hallway was empty. The air felt lighter. We walked carefully back up the stairs. This time, the entrance was there. We ran outside into the night. We didn't stop until we reached the street. We promised never to go back to the hospital. For days after, I had nightmares about the woman. Sometimes I heard her voice calling my name when I was alone. Lily said she saw her in her dreams, standing at the end of her bed. A week later, Jason told us his grandmother used to work at that hospital. She said there was a fire many years ago. Some patients and nurses died because they couldn't escape. People said their spirits never left. Maybe the woman we saw was one of them. We tried to forget what happened, but the memories stayed. Sometimes when I walk past the empty lot where the hospital used to be, I feel a cold wind and hear a soft humming. I wonder if the woman is still waiting for someone to help her. Even now, years later, I still dream about that night. In my dreams, I am back in the hospital, lost in the endless hallways. The woman is always there, watching from the shadows. I wake up cold and afraid, and I can still hear her whisper my name. When I was in junior high school in Taichung, my friends and I liked to tell ghost stories. Our school was old, built before my parents were born. The walls were stained, and the halls always smelled a little musty. There were rumors about the third floor of the old classroom building. Some students said they saw a girl in a white dress standing by the window late at night. Others said they heard someone crying in the girls' bathroom when no one was inside. One rainy afternoon, my friend Wei suggested we stay late and explore the old building. He said he wanted to prove there were no ghosts. I didn't want to go, but everyone else agreed. I didn't want to look like a coward, so I went along. We waited until the last teacher left. The rain was falling harder, and the sky outside was dark. The old classroom building was quiet. The lights in the hallway flickered. We walked up the stairs, our shoes squeaking on the wet floor. On the third floor, the air felt colder. The wind whistled through broken windows. I could hear my own heartbeat. We decided to check the girls' bathroom first. The door creaked when we pushed it open. The mirrors were cloudy and the sinks were stained. There were only 3 stalls. The last one was always locked. Some students said a girl had died there many years ago and her ghost never left. My friend G knocked on the door and laughed, but I felt uneasy. Wei dared me to open the stall door. I tried the handle, but it wouldn't move. Suddenly, we heard a soft sobbing sound. It was coming from inside the locked stall. My friends stopped laughing. The sobbing grew louder. It sounded like a girl crying. I stepped back, my hands shaking. Then the sobbing stopped. We waited, holding our breath. The door to the stall slowly creaked open by itself. No one was inside. The stall was empty, but the air inside felt much colder. My friends ran out of the bathroom and I followed them, my heart pounding. We stopped in the hallway, trying to catch our breath. Wei tried to laugh it off, but his face was pale. G said we should leave, but Wei wanted to check the old storage room at the end of the hall. He said if we didn't go, everyone would think we were scared. We walked down the hallway together. The floorboards creaked under our feet. The storage room was always locked, but that day the door was slightly open. We pushed it and went inside. The room was full of old desks, chairs, and boxes. It smelled like dust and something rotten. In the corner, there was an old-school uniform hanging on a hook. It looked faded and dirty. Suddenly, the door slammed, shut behind us. The room went dark. My friend screamed. I tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Then we heard footsteps outside, slow and dragging. Someone was walking down the hallway toward us. The footsteps stopped in front of the door. We all held our breath. Then a girl's voice whispered from the other side, "Why are you here?" Her voice was soft and sad. No one answered. The doorknob rattled and the door creaked open. A cold wind blew into the room. There was no one outside. We ran out of the storage room and down the stairs. When we reached the first floor, we didn't stop running until we were outside the school gate. The rain was still falling, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go home. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the girl's voice. I wondered if we had seen a real ghost. The next day at school, my friends and I promised not to talk about what happened. But I noticed strange things after that. Sometimes I saw a shadow in the hallway when no one was there. Sometimes I heard footsteps behind me, but when I turned around, no one was there. One evening, I stayed late to finish cleaning the classroom. It was already dark when I finished. As I walked past the old building, I heard someone calling my name. The voice was soft, almost a whisper. I looked up and saw a girl in a white dress standing by the third-floor window. Her hair was long and her face was pale. She was looking right at me. I froze. The girl raised her hand and waved. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. Then the lights in the building flickered and went out. When the lights came back, the girl was gone. After that, I tried to avoid the old building, but sometimes I still had to walk past it. Each time I felt like someone was watching me from the windows. My friends said they felt the same way. One day, our teacher told us a story during class. She said that many years ago, a student had died in the old building. No one knew exactly what happened, but some people said she was bullied and locked in the bathroom stall. Others said she fell from the third-floor window. The school tried to keep it quiet, but the story spread. Some teachers said her spirit never left. After hearing the story, I understood why the old building felt so strange. I felt sorry for the girl. I wished we hadn't disturbed her. That night, I dreamed about her. She was standing in the hallway, crying. She looked at me and said, "I just want someone to listen." When I woke up, I felt cold. I decided to bring some flowers to the old building. After school, I went to the third floor and left the flowers by the window. I whispered, "I'm sorry." The air felt warmer for a moment, and I thought I heard a soft voice say, "Thank you." After that, the strange things happened less often. I still felt uneasy around the old building, but I didn't see the girl again. My friends and I stopped talking about ghosts. but we always remembered what happened that rainy afternoon. Now when I pass by my old school, I look up at the third-floor window. Sometimes I think I see a white dress or a shadow, but I'm not afraid anymore. I hope the girl has found peace. I hope no one else will disturb her.